Now, just to introduce today's event in a bit more detail, at the European Illustration Forum, we believe that all illustrators deserve a stable career and to be paid fairly for their work. We know that lots of illustrators out there really struggle to maintain a sustainable income. And from the results of our recent diversity survey, we know that this issue is even greater for people from underrepresented backgrounds. The EIF really want to support illustrators by making key educational information about pricing, licensing and negotiation accessible to all. So we're relaunching the Price It Right campaign to share professional practice resources with the illustration community and to help really communicate the value of illustration to those commissioners. So in this free webinar today, we welcome 4 very knowledgeable speakers on screen from all around Europe to present short, informative talks. We'll also introduce practical business resources that you can access in the future, like the Ninja Guide. The event's going to be split into 4 bite-sized sections. This will cover how to build a quote with Nurgül Senefe, an intro to buyouts with Paolo Rui, negotiating with confidence from Brazell, and an intro to the Ninja Guide with Clara Cerviño. Some sections may overlap slightly, but we think it's really important to explore these topics from all different angles, so you can't say it too much. After the presentations, if we have time, we hope to have a short Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout, please do type these into the chat, and I will go back and read through as many as possible to the speakers at the end of the session. We have lots of great content to cover today, and I'm going to be the timekeeper. So I ask the speakers to please forgive me if I do hurry them along at any point. But let's get into the content. So we will be starting with Nurgül Senefe, who is the president of the Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Society in Turkey, who will deliver a talk around 25 minutes on how to build a quote. So Nurgül, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be with you here. Let me share my screen first. Turn it off. Okay, we are here for the How to Build a Quote, Getting Budget and Pricing Rights presentation. I am Nurgül Senefe. I'm attending from Turkey. We are the former member of EIF. Illustrators platform is based in Istanbul, social enterprise, not-for-profit organization, the white label community with over 400 members. And I'm a social entrepreneur, social innovation designer, author, creator. I'm passionate about creating a good impact and humanity and nature, being a blissful and lifelong learner. I'm the founding president of Illustrators platform and the board member of EIF. And today I have only 25 minutes to talk about how to make a budget this challenging time. This is a challenging time to share it all. Budgeting is an important and a broad topic, but hey, I have prepared a strong summary presentation covering all important matters, and I promise you'll get some good hints and general perspective where you need to be the most careful about when you are preparing your budget for a project. Now, let me move. Okay. Quote requested. Yay! There's a potential big project, but how will you do your budget? Here we go. Have you ever found yourself staring blankly at the screen after taking on a job in the field you are not familiar with? Or when you are not quite sure about it, or feeling lost because you don't know and you have no idea what to price or quote and don't know how to put together a proper quote. Or even there are times such as leaving a meeting without even mentioning a budget, what you have in your mind, or feeling frustrated when you find out the same job was done for much higher price elsewhere. No worries. We've all been there. So what are the essential factors you must consider in your budget items? Let's talk about that. First, you need to estimate a budget. The quick and one of the reliable ways of doing that is by staying informed about the market you do work and you live in, or you are doing the job for. In other words, knowing your peers, understanding the terms of similar jobs, it's all about networking. And speaking about networking and illustration, I just want to open up a parenthesis here. Become a member, please. Become a member of a community or an association in your country. It is an essential and will support you at this point. We wouldn't be exaggerating if we said it's the safest and the most enjoyable place to build your network, gain knowledge, and increase visibility in the industry. Join to your community in your country. Let's make the world of illustration even better all together. When we go, okay, let's go back to our main topic. List your budget items in an Excel spreadsheet. As I said before, setting a budget, I advise you consult with your peers and review the budgets for similar jobs. And another tip, make sure your client is aware of copyright issues or take the time to inform them. Even with well-intentional clients and collaborators, copyright disputes can still arise. Now, what are the factors that affect the budget? Let's break them down. The key budget determinants are, basically we can say, operational cost, labor cost, copyright licensing, your rights, purchases. It could be during your project, you may have to purchase some products, materials, or services, or rentals, or even you have to pay some licensing fees. So these can be edited more, but the main essential key budget determinants we can summarize as these 5 major items. I want to give some samples for operational cost. Okay, let me take a deeper look at some samples for operational cost. Client meetings back and forth, you go to their office or online meetings and or before and during the project. Besides, all those pre and in project discussions are one of the operational cost items. And desk time, email, and the cost of research hours are also essential. Another sample for operational costs, sometimes for some projects, you have to make some research not only on internet or desk time, you have to take some trips and go to different places. So travel needs, researches, or it could be even meetings for the project. So the travel cost and accommodations and meals and etc., those expenses are also a sample for operational cost. Okay, so primarily operational costs, we can summarize that the time you'll spend on meetings, discussions, and preparing the proposal, and research time needed before securing the job and once you've landed it. Do we need to say time is money? Until you get the job, you already have started your labor time, actually. So your time is your cost. Another way of saying it, actually, your time is one of your main inventory. So you have to keep that in mind. The second essential determinants, let's take a look at that. Actually, before that, I wanted to add some affecting points, factors of your budget. These are often the most overlooked or forgotten expense items we face today. You could be a newbie, young illustrator professional, or you could be a professional illustrator for many times. I see a lot of samples of these factors affecting their budget, and the result is not getting proper profit or not catching up with break-even points with your project. So that's why I wanted to highlight them here. The key factors affecting your budget, please keep them in mind while you're preparing your budget. I want to give a deeper look into some of them. For instance, revisions. how many revisions are included for free? How many revisions are chargeable? When should you accept revisions? Don't forget, a proper brief at the start impacts your budget and directly affects the project timeline delivery schedule. So this is very essential and important factor. While you're preparing your budget, you need to make some assumptions and foresee. Very important principles when it comes to revisions. The client should provide a clear instructions or briefing. Based on this, you create a draft sketch. This sketch is subject to changes by the client, but once approved, it becomes the basis for the final work. And for changes, if a client wants to make changes after initial approval, they may need to pay extra depending on the complexity. And next approval process, the client has to get back to you on the approval within 2 or 5 days. Of course, this can varies depending on where you live, what sector you work with, in what market you are using the common practices. I wanted to give that little deep insight of that revision part because this is one of the main impact points when it comes to budgeting. Some sample for key factors, again, operating cost. When we say operating cost at the beginning, what I meant was you need to consider, we think like it's in the pocket and we never consider those expenses while we are doing the budget, but hey, we are actually paying the cost for office rent, electricity, water, internet, gas, phone, and staff or other fixed cost. It could be a freelancer working at home, or it could be, you can have your own brand and company. Either way, it doesn't make difference. If you're at home, some portion of square meter of your home is your office. So you need to make a calculation as operating cost in that sense. So taxes, these are one of the major things. A lot of illustrators miss that point. Of course, regulations may vary from country to country, so you need to consult with your financial advisor. I'm just pointing out the key factors when it comes to taxes. Are VAT tax. If you're invoicing your client, there's always VAT comes on top of that. If you're a freelancer, you have to pay withholding tax. So you need to make that calculation in your budgeting and in your negotiations. The final price you are talking, is it including withholding tax or without withholding tax? So if you are invoicing, of course, there's a income tax, and when they're wiring money, there are some bank commission expenses. Those needs to be taken into consideration again when it comes to budgeting. Okay, the labor cost. This is one of the main determinants of your budget. When we look at the labor cost, actually we are the illustrator who is doing the job, essentially taking the time. So while you are delivering your project, there is stages, primarily sketch, drafts, initial approval, draft revisions, and of course, as we mentioned earlier, revisions are sometimes goes back and forth many times, and some budgets should be also covering if how many revisions is going to be out there, if you're going to charge them or not. All these needs to be defined. And final work, sometimes even though you get the best briefing and approvals on your sketches and everything, still at the end of the project, the final work gets rejected. So I wanted to point that out. There's a reasons for that, why and how, but I'm not going to go deep into that today. So to cover up the labor cost, we can say primarily your sketches, drafts, initial approvals, draft revisions, final sketch, coloring, if necessary, scanning of the work, final artwork, approval process and potential revisions, final approval, printing, and finally delivering. Each of these steps, skills, and efforts, these are what give your work its commercial value. So you need to consider how much you need to charge all these steps of cost you are covering for this project. So this is important item in your budget. Okay. The third determinant key factors are usage rights. When we say usage rights, it's about the copyrights and licensing. Which rights are you commissioning and licensing? This is very important. Of course, there's a lot that we can discuss about this topic, but I just want to give you a brief overview, which items you should need to consider while you're doing your budgeting. So I'll be pointing out in that sense some points. Your usage rights, is it for print media usage rights or digital media usage rights? Adaptation rights for different media or discipline, or single use, time limited, or perpetual use rights, domestic or international usage rights, rights to use the work on the TV in advertisement or products, etc. All these items I'm pointing out, it creates a different budgeting while you are licensing and commissioning your work, which is affecting your, of course, budget. So within those okay, let me see if I'm stepping out any items I want to share with you. Okay, these different rights significantly impact the budget for your work. When you're all done with these items, as I shared, your budget is ready. I'm sure, of course, depending on the budget and whom you're working with and what you are doing and in what country, there are other items can be added, but I'm just covering the major points that we should definitely consider and take into consideration. Taking all these factors into account and conducting your research will help you determine the average budget you can request for the job. And once you have this average, your proposal should be clear and easy to understand. Trying to impress the client with extreme terms and complicated items usually isn't an effective strategy. So I want to point that, underline that. So you can use ready-made templates, Excel, or similar programs. As I mentioned those items, what I usually do, I have one Excel sheet for my budget, and it's usually inclusive of wide variety of all items. And depending on the project, I include or not include certain items in that project. So I see what is my main real cost when I get this job. So, and on top of that, of course, I need to put some expected income earning percentage as well. So you have the cost of doing that job, which I described all those main items. And on top of that, you need to earn, income. So profit margin you should put in. And as a total, whatever the budget comes up, it's your code, it's your pitching code that you should be sharing with your client. So in your proposal, it's helpful to include the description, timeline, quantity, unit price, and expense items for the service you are offering. However, be careful, please, not to include so specific ideas and don't consult them within your proposal pitching paper. As far as you have not signed the contract, you didn't get the job yet. So, and one very important policy you should include into your proposal is cancellation policy. If the project is canceled for any reason, after certain stages, you have entered to a percentage of a payment. For example, after the sketch or different associations has recommendations, and the common practices are different in different markets, but I'll just give you the hint just to give the idea, but you might receive 25% after sketch point, and after final approval, you should receive 100%. But as I said, it really varies depending on what marketplace and which sector you're working in. But keeping in mind, you should have a cancellation policy for sure. I think I'm good in my time. So this is it for what you should be considering while you're doing your budget, and what are the essential points and what are the determinant points in the budgeting. And as I said at the beginning, budgeting is an important and a broad topic. So far, we have covered the basics, and I just shared some tips with you. However, most of the AF member associations and our Illustrators platform also offering trainings. There are some paid or non-paid, like as today. Many courses, training sessions, knowledge sharing. So how to prepare a proposal for both invoiced or freelance projects. So please keep in touch within your association, within your country, and keep an eye on EAF. We are doing great jobs for the sake of illustration. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nurgül. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. Next up, I would like to introduce illustrator, educator, and EIF board member, the fantastic Paolo Rui, who will now present an important 15-minute micro guide on the topic of buyouts. So over to you, Paolo.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for attending this webinar. It's very important for us to spread the important issues related to fair practices in the field. And today I'm not going to show my face, which is kind of weathered, and I'm going to show you instead an interesting presentation. Before that, I would like to thank Nurgül for what she's done, because she mentioned some important issues related to negotiation, and writing a quotation is a very difficult moment, especially when in some situations it's the client himself or themselves who ask you right away what they want, and they tell you right away how much they're going to pay you for that. So the issue of buyouts is something which one way or the other is going to affect our career one moment or the other. Some people totally skip it, and I found a way to avoid it, but in most cases we are subject to it one way or the other. So let's go to my presentation here, and oops, sorry, let me share my screen. Okay, this is my screen. Sure. And this is my presentation. 1 second. Full screen. Oh, no. Can you see? Sorry, I'm asking a technical question. Can you see the faces on the right?
We can see the full screen, yes.
No, but can you only see my presentation, or also the thumbnails of your faces?
We can just see you.
You just can see the presentation, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Looks great.
So, okay, let's proceed. Buyouts, this is a micro guide. Let's start first to understand what copyrights are. Copyrights are the right we assign a client to commercially exploit one work, a creation we've done. So that might be an illustration, a drawing, comics or layout or whatever. And when a client asks us or proposes us or requires us to grant a buyout, a total buyout, we should consider our copyrights exactly like products on the shelves of the supermarket. So when we create something, we are the owners of the totality of the commercial exploitation rights of an image, unless otherwise stated in a document, in an agreement. But now we start from this one. So copyrights are exactly like products on the shelves of the supermarket. If a client wants one, must pay for one. The same as when we go to a grocery store, when we buy something, we fill up a trolley, and we have to pay for each and every item we put in the cart. If they want more, they have to pay for more. This is just common sense, right? To make another metaphor, we can consider the cake of the copyrights within the creation of an image as a cake. And usually a client wants to buy a slice of the cake because they only need part of these rights for their purpose. But in the case of a buyout, very often they only pay for one slice and get all the rest for free. So a buyout is a key to access the supermarket of all rights related to an illustration. But besides this, they not only get the keys to the supermarket, but they automatically get the keys to all the warehouses where other items are stored before they get shelved in order to be sold when the products are all sold from the supermarket. So as long as the buyout is long, and as long as the duration of the buyout, which can be limited sometimes, not always, if it can be limited for the length of this assigned buyout, they can go into the supermarket and the warehouses and get whatever they want. Who asks for a buyout? Usually the advertising agencies, and this is done mostly for their convenience because they need to keep a person, to have a person who keeps track of all the copyrighted assigned to the agency and the clients. And this involves the payment of something to this person. And on the other hand, if they get all the rights, they don't have to care for this, and whatever they extra earning they can make out of your work gets shared among the shareholders of the agency or the clients who's going to use the images. Publishing companies. In Italy and Europe, there is a limitation of 20 years for the assigned rights for publishing. They can be renewed. In other countries, in extra European countries, there is no such limit. And then there are the industries themselves. Occasionally, we work directly for clients which produce something which reproduces our works on them. So occasionally they say, okay, this image is totally identified with our brand, and so we want to keep all the rights for ourselves. But who gets a buyout automatically? Certainly anyone who gets a signature on a contract for work for hire or work as a service. These are contracts which are very often now offered also by publishing companies, and they totally bypass the copyright concept because they hire us as people who have to offer a service, such as a plumber, an electrician, or somebody who's going to paint the walls of your living room. So if we cannot read our contracts, we must be careful because very often they try to use this form. So it's up to us to respond. They say we don't accept work like this. These are corporations which exclude copyrights by definition. But we must understand, we must go deeper into the meaning of this total assignment of copyrights, because when we first create an image, we know why or for what purpose it's being created. A client calls us, needs a book cover or needs an illustration for a packaging, so we know exactly what they need it for. But when we grant, what happens next, it's not up to us to know, because there's no way to know what will happen in the future of an image. To make an example, think about the songs, very famous songs from the 60s, 70s, 50s, whatever, which now can show up in TV ads or in the movies. When the artists created those songs, they were not thinking about creating a music that could be used to sell, I don't know, jeans or ice creams or whatever. But after maybe the same year or after a few years, maybe those songs get used, and they should provide some remuneration for the authors. And this is just common sense, right? To make an example, let's consider this: The Little Prince, created by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry in 1943, just before his death in 1944, missing in action in the Sahara Desert. His work has become so successful all around the world, it's translated in hundreds of languages. And if you go and search for The Little Prince now with Google, you're going to find so many different products which reproduce or offer a new vision of the same character, which surely Antoine de Saint-Exupéry didn't even dare to imagine during his lifetime. So this is what might happen. So now we are talking about what might happen with our works. Because we're talking about possibilities, not certainties, but a potential. So here is a list of potential uses of an image. This is not related to any particular image. These are just general terms which can represent situations where an image can be reproduced. So where we assigned copyrights, so the total buyout, we assign the totality of the commercial exploitation rights to a client. We include also these ones, and some of them are really bizarre, okay? So they start from postcards, business cards, greeting cards, and so on. I'm going to stop only with a few of them, just read them yourselves. Magazine ads, showroom decorations, it happens. Wall mapping, road signs and billboards, television advertisements, packaging of any kind, and merchandise, as we have seen with the Little Prince. Trade fair displays, textile production, which is an important area of usage of images. Shopping bags, tote bags, backpacks, rucksacks. Each one of these items here is a whole universe, because if you just consider something like luggage trolleys, I have seen at the airports there are people carrying, especially children, carrying illustrated trolleys. They come in different sizes and shapes and colors. So when you grant the rights, you grant the rights for one image that can be exploited in many, many different ways within each of these items. Shoes, they are decorated shoes. Now I forgot to add also decorated nails. Now there are people who reproduce on nails some images they like. Decorations on helmets, skateboards, surfboards, sailboats, sails, airplanes. It happens occasionally to celebrate some event or anniversary. Some air companies, they decorate whole planes and invite illustrators to use their images, or they ask them to use something they produced in the past. Decorations on ferries and liners, and menus, of course, restaurants. In a restaurant, there could be many different kinds of different decorations, starting from the sign to the wall paintings or illustrations hanging on the wall, or actually mural paintings, and so on. Decorations for bowling halls, casinos, amusement parks, theme parks, funeral homes. You know, there are whole branches of the market where illustration can sneak in, and we don't know yet. Bar tables, bar chairs, bar uniforms, decorations for shops, glass creations, which are sort of transformations in 3D, a form of 2D images. Or this is very important, sales to image banks. A sale to an image bank, which is very often included in publishing contracts, means that other people, third parties, could use our images to do whatever they want, all the above and other things, without having to pay for anything for us. Plush toys, plastic toys, metal toys, tattoos. More and more people reproduce some tattoos, illustrations, and drawings they see around. I know I wrote the decorations here. The metaverse. The metaverse is, you know, it's a alternative reality where there are shops, stores where people buy and sell things, and it's a whole new universe where all the previous items can be reproduced and used. And then we have decoration for pots, baby bottles, nappies, napkins, pajamas, foulards, scarves, shower curtains, and so on. Pillows, and all sorts of things. This is just a list of about 100 different possibilities, but actually there are hundreds of them. Decoration of paper plates, cups, and so on. At the end, a projection on an airship, or decoration on an airship. Okay, remember this. And AI training. AI training, you know, now they're doing it without asking for a permission, but in the future, this these rights might be, once there are going to be some regulations, these rights might be included in a request for a buyout. So let's going back to the principle. This is the actual use that the client requires when they hire us to create an image, to design something. And maybe they're going to pay something like an average fee, which can be something like 500 euros. But this is the potential use. Actually, it could be much bigger than this. And the potential uses are all the items I showed you before, and eventually even more. And so we should have a payment which should be related to the number of different usages they should make. So 500 euros or dollars or pounds by 10, 100 or 1,000, according to the market. If the market is local or national or international or intercontinental, including the planets, other planets, of course, the amount to be paid should be even longer, even bigger than this. So buyouts, how to respond to a client who's asking us for a buyout, offering a fixed fee, which is defined, which is absolutely limited, very limited compared to the amount of rights which are granted. Ask your client if they want to display your work on an airship. If they don't, go through the above usage list and mark on the ones they actually need. So just tell them, okay, for this amount, I'm going to give you only what you actually need, because we are not going to talk about airships now. One thing I forgot to mention is the fact that which is extremely important when we grant the rights or the buyout, so the total amount of economic exploitation rights to a client, that means we cannot use them in any other way. So when we grant them the rights to project or represent an image on an airship, that means we will never be able to do it ourselves. Maybe there is a client, a billionaire who owns an airship who wants to invite us to decorate his own airship. We cannot do that. The original client is not going to use it, but we cannot use it. So this is totally unfair. So talking about buyouts, if you, client, pay at least 50,000 euros or dollars or pounds, we can talk about it. Otherwise, no, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know, I didn't check the time. I hope, yeah, pretty much.
That was pretty much perfect timing, Paolo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that presentation. And thank you for those visual metaphors. They help make it really memorable. So you can stop sharing your screen now, Paolo, if you've got that option.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So next up, I would like to introduce Derek Brazell, who is the AOI Publications and Membership Manager and also the EIF Co-President, who will deliver a 35-minute presentation on negotiating with confidence.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you, Paolo and Nurgül, for those really interesting aspects of pricing and licensing your artwork. It's I'm sure I'll be covering a few, I'll be covering over some of these extra bits as well. But what I want to really focus on today is looking at negotiation and how you actually approach this. And I know we would all love to see our artwork on airships, looking out the window, seeing something flying by. That would be fantastic. It's not very common, sadly, but as Paolo says, people can put something on anything at all if they have the copyright or all the rights in the artwork. So I'll start sharing my screen and just go through what we're going to be covering in my section today. So basically, we're talking about negotiating with confidence. And this is something that, especially when you're starting out as a freelancer, it's hard to feel confident about discussing things with those big clients who understand everything that's going on, and you're not the most important person in the deal. But actually, it's really important to remember that you are a very important person in the deal, and that actually what you're going to be doing is working with somebody on an equal footing. The client is someone who needs an amazing image. You're the person with all those skills, and the service you're offering is to produce those amazing images. So it's really good to think about yourself as an essential part of any kind of deal that a client might be looking at. So, negotiation is something that we're not all typically doing during the rest of, different parts of our lives. And it's something that we aren't too sure about when we first start, but it's absolutely true that the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. I was an illustrator myself for about 20 years, and I've been helping illustrators at the AOI for many years too. So I have a good understanding of, taking a deep breath and saying you want a higher fee, or saying you want to discuss a different element of the contract. And it's quite clear from when we talk to our members at the association that they appreciate having someone saying, this is how you can do it. So I'm hoping that what we're talking about today will help you also have an understanding of how you can negotiate with clients. So we're going to talk about having the right approach when you're dealing with your clients and discussing fees and contracts, negotiating those fees. And Nurgül's covered a lot of those aspects, but we'll be talking about how you sort of talk around those different aspects. Possible fee erosion tactics, and those are ones where the client is kind of deliberately trying to maybe make you feel you've got to hurry things along and you have to give a quote very quickly, how you can sort of deal with that too. When it's actually worthwhile walking away, because not every single commission is something that you have to do. You can decide that you're not going to go forward with it, and that's absolutely reasonable. And we'll just end on a few points about contracts, because obviously contracts, as Nurgül talked about, they're important elements, and having things like cancellation clauses in there are really important aspects. So thinking about your approach is a really essential aspect. It's quite easy to feel, like I mentioned, that you aren't the most important person in this deal, but you are. And so coming in, even if you aren't feeling super confident, just to approach it knowing that actually you can deal with this. The client needs you. It's something that they can't do themselves. So really thinking, I can do this the right way. And it's basically a case of getting your head into the right kind of place to be able to do that. And one of those ways is to really think about the fact that you are offering a really skilled service. Even if you've just left college, for example, you've been studying for years, you've honed your visual voice. If you've been working for several years, you've got all this experience behind you. Feel confident that actually you can produce a brilliant image for your client, and that you're not doing a favor to them. They've asked you to do something, but it is a business deal. You aren't being given, it's not something to feel grateful for that someone is offering you a job. It is great to get a job. You can feel grateful in the background, but you don't need to feel grateful in terms of the fact that someone is offering you a job because you are offering a service. So remembering that you are equal to that commissioner. They are someone, they've got the money, of course, and there's no getting around that, but equally, you're giving them something that they can't do themselves. And really, negotiation, it's a case of discussing things with the client. So there'll always be often a situation where you're saying something, they're saying something, there's toing and froing, there's discussions around the fees, etc. But you are the person who is going to be getting to a point with them, the right kind of fee. And it doesn't always happen immediately. You'll have discussions. Things can take a couple of days. Don't expect that a fee can be sorted out within an hour. Sometimes it can. But on the whole, both of you are going to be discussing things. There'll be some to and fro. But ultimately, you want both sides to be happy. So you to be okay with it, the client to be okay with it. So within a discussion, you might have come in at a certain point, but you might not end up with that. You might end up with something a bit lower, and we'll talk about that a bit later. Equally, the client might have hoped that you were going to put a quote for the job in that was below their budget, so they save some money, but they may find they've had to pay nearly all their budget, which of course is completely fine because you're worth it. And it's always worth remembering that within illustration, and I know this can be a frustration for people, but there are no set fees in illustration. There's no right or wrong fee. The fee you're quoting is the one that you believe is the right thing for your job. And so you should never feel that you're getting the wrong fee. A client can't tell you that's the wrong thing to ask for. They can think that it's outside their budget and they want to discuss it with you. But within illustration, there isn't a particular set number of fees for certain things. Within the UK, there are a few industries that will offer a budget, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but they aren't very many of them. So in most situations, the client is going to say to you, we want you to do this, this, and this. What's your fee for that? So you are in a situation where you are negotiating and discussing that fee. And again, important to remember that this happens absolutely all the time. It happens with most discussions around fees. And a good thing to remember is that, agents, illustration agents are doing this absolutely all the time with clients. So clients expect to have negotiation. They don't think they're going to say, we have €5 for this job. And you go, yeah, great. They know that you're going to come back and discuss things with them. So do remember, negotiation is a completely normal part of the illustration process, the illustration commissioning process. So just having that in your mind and going in with confidence, even if you don't feel that exact confidence, it's knowing that you are an important person within this commission. And thinking about negotiation, it isn't always all about the money. There's things that you need to discuss with your client. So you will be talking about the fees, and that's one of the main things that we are discussing today. So obviously the fee has to be appropriate for you. It has to reflect what the job is. But also there'll be elements such as the project schedule. So do they want something for next week? Is it for December? Is it for 2025? If it's a book project, for example, you need to know what that schedule is as well, because you might be busy. You need to be able to organize your own work, etc. So talking to them about schedules is important too. Nurgül mentioned amends, and yes, you want to be clear about how many amends you will do to your artwork. That would be for the rough images you're supplying before you go to final artwork, but also how many amends you might do on final artwork, which should be a small amount, obviously, because everything should have generally been sorted out with the roughs. But we kind of generally expect people to maybe do 3 rounds of amends for roughs and maybe some small tweaks on final artwork. So, but having that in writing as well is useful, because some clients will keep changing their minds. They want something adding, they want something else adding. And as Nurgül mentioned, if people keep asking for extra changes, then it's perfectly reasonable for you to ask for additional fees to reflect that. The license terms, which we'll be covering in a moment, and Nurgül's covered that a lot as well. So you do need to know how the work is being used, where it's going to be used, and for how long it's going to be used. And also, very importantly, the paperwork. So the contract, which will include all the license details, but also the terms and conditions under which your contract will work. And it's really important to get that sorted out before you go, proceed with the actual artwork part of it all. And much of this approach is kind of about your tone of voice as well. It can feel a bit, it's brilliant to be offered a job, but it can be a little anxiety making as well when you're getting approached by somebody and you're sitting there thinking, yeah, I do want to do this job, but have I got time? I need to think about the money. I need some time to think about what my quote would be. But we really recommend that, within the short period of time of getting an approach by email, for example, from your client, that you do respond. So it doesn't have to be giving them all the information they might be asking for, if they're asking for a quote, etc. But you can go back saying, this looks really exciting. I'm really delighted to do this project. I will get back to you, later on this afternoon, or I will get back to you tomorrow morning with those questions that you've asked me. So don't leave them hanging for, a whole day or days and days. Even just an email that recognizes that they have approached you is very much worthwhile putting back to them, so that they aren't worrying about whether you can do the job or not. They want to know if you are available, and knowing that you're going back to them, that kind of gives you confidence too. You know that you've done the right thing, and you're giving yourself time, you're building in time to give yourself the right amount of time to be able to think about your quote and think about all the aspects of the quote that you need to consider. Being nice, being pleasant, that sounds a really obvious thing to say. But of course, being nice with clients, being pleasant, being an enjoyable person to work with is great, because clients come back to people that they like working with, and it helps the whole thing move smoothly. So by being nice, I don't mean that you capitulate or you give in to every single demand that they want. You're still being quietly assertive in what you do, but you're doing it in a nice way. And people will, respond to you if you're talking to them in a nice way and just saying, I'd like to discuss this fee. You don't go back saying, you haven't given me enough money. You just go back with it in a nice tone, saying, with email tone, of course, most of the time, and being pleasant about it. But at the same time, like I said, not being a pushover, sticking to what your aims are. So we'll be talking about, you know, you've worked out a quote, it's gone to the client, they've said we want to pay less, for example. You go back with a different query, etc. It's knowing what you want and being as firm as you can about it. But at the same time, don't avoid any awkward questions. You need to get as much information as you possibly can to put forward a really appropriate quote. And don't ever feel, like we said at the beginning, putting off responses. Don't put off questions. As we mentioned, clients will expect that. You know, sometimes they forget to give you all the details, for example, and so you feel that you need to go back and find out a little bit more. They won't mind that. They want to make sure really that you understand what the project is, what's required for the project. And so any discussions between you and client, again, very much expected and not something you should feel remotely awkward about. So thinking about those license fees, and Nurgül's kind of covered this earlier on, but just to emphasize those main aspects of what you're thinking about when you are putting a quote together. Nurgül was talking a lot about covering sort of the running costs of your business as a freelancer, and that is really important to think about, that, you know, you aren't just sitting there drawing, you've got electricity bills, you've got internet bills, etc. You've had to buy a new laptop, you've had to buy some new paint. All those things count, and it's important to think about that your fees do need to reflect what the cost of your business is. But the main points that I want to think about here are, you know, what is a license? So if someone comes to you with a job, you need to know exactly what uses the client's going to put to it. So is it going to be on a t-shirt? Is it going to be on an airship? That's what we want to know. Is it going to be on an app, a magazine cover, a children's picture book, a huge range, a mural, for example? What do they want to use it for? Obviously, that's very important. Also, where does the client want to use it? So geographically, is it just in Turkey? Is it all of the UK? Is it worldwide? Is it just China? The bigger the territory, the more value your quote will have, because, you know, if a large number of people are seeing something, using a service, purchasing a product, then your illustration has more value. So whereabouts does the client want to use it? And then the other main line is, how long do they want to use it for? So it might be, I mean, a children's picture book is one of the rare things you might license for the period of copyright, but on the whole, most projects are licensed maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, maybe something quite short if it's for social media example. But how long do they want to use it for? Sometimes clients don't remember to give you all these details. They'll probably tell you what they want to use it for, but they don't always necessarily tell you, you know, where it's going to be used, how long it's going to be used for. So as we said, always absolutely fine to go back and ask those questions. Other things that important to know, the size of the client. So if you are, you know, if Google comes to you for a job, you're going to be charging a whole lot more than you'll be doing if it's a local hairdresser that lives in the town where you are. So if a big company wants to do advertising, that fee is going to be substantially more than one that's going to be for a small client, because it'll be going in front of a lot more people, and they'll be paying for their advert probably to be on a lot more different platforms. So the other points we've got there, where it'll be seen, time period for how it's going to be seen, and the exact usages. So are there more than one illustration? Sometimes people might say, well, we want this for a new spaghetti bolognese food packaging cover. But do they just want the top? Do they want the side? Do they want the back? Do they want a whole wraparound? You know, what dimensions will those be? So you need to get all that information from the client as well. Will the image be in multiple formats? So maybe if you're doing an advertising campaign, is it going to be on digital billboards in the street? Is it going to be banner adverts online? Will it be paid for social media posts that arrive on all our Instagram feeds? You know, you'll be charging more if there are multiple dimensions. And what are the deadlines? Obviously, that's really important. You need to know exactly what your deadlines are going to be, because you've got to be able to fit them in. Can you get it done in time? Again, all these things, if it seems like a really short deadline, you can still say, is there any room to change this deadline? It's all about negotiation. And maybe there isn't room to change things, but it's good to ask those questions to try and get it done as possible, you know, as quickly as possible. So I put a few quotes in here that are maybe some useful wording that you can use when you're getting back to people. I can put actually those into the chat just so you've got those to have. But it is thinking, you know, like we said, acknowledging that you've received their request and that you're really interested in it, getting back to them with that information. And let me just stick this into chat. If I can find my chat. There we go. Sorry, it's taking me a little while. I'm also actually in the chat putting in the pricing right resources that are going to help you think about your pricing, and resources from all our organizations within the EIF. So I'm just putting those points in there. So thinking about that, you know, before I send you the quote, can I just get the answer to this question? I need to ask you this. So going back with those relevant questions, completely fine at that point before you give them a quote. And a useful thing to, well, tell people sometimes, of course, is that, as Paolo talked about, if they don't really give you how they want to use the work, exactly how they want to use the work, you've got to think about it in a larger context. So are they going to use it just on some spaghetti bolognese packaging, or do they want to use it for advertising the spaghetti bolognese? Do they want to put it on paid for social media, etc.? And if you can get all the accurate details of what a job will be, your price will be not going down, but it'll reflect the smaller usage. So if somebody isn't giving you all the details, you've probably got to give them a larger quote to cover possible uses. So you can tell them, the more details you give me, the more I can really refine my quote and make it as appropriate and accurate as possible. And just as a quick heads up, I've put those links I just mentioned into chat. So in the links, we've got the European Illustrators Forum Price It Right resources. If you're watching this on catch up, I'll leave this on screen for a little moment so you can maybe take a quick screen for phone picture of it. So look those up. We've also on the AOI website got a really good resource that's called How to License Illustration. And this is a useful thing to give to clients to help them understand exactly how licensing works. Some clients who maybe aren't familiar with commissioning illustration don't always have a really good understanding of how illustration commissioning works, what it's based on, how a fee might be worked out. So they might think that it's all based on day rates, which it isn't. And this agreement helps you understand that actually illustration is based on the points that Nurgül was talking about. And, you know, there's important usage of the artwork, territory of where it's going to be used, and for how long it's going to be used. So those links are in the chat for anyone who's watching now. So next, let's think about negotiating those fees. And some of the practical points in terms of people getting in touch with you, clients getting in touch with you, is to treat everything as professionally as possible. We do know that sometimes clients get in touch about a job over social media. They might direct message you on Instagram, for example. And that's okay, but we do recommend that you don't continue discussions over social media, don't negotiate over social media. There is an informality around social media that isn't always the best thing to be dealing with. And occasionally we have members who've had issues where, you know, they're a bit confused about what's going on. There isn't a useful email trail. And that's one of the great things about email, is that you know what's been discussed. You can see how it moved along. And it's fine if someone gets in touch by social media, just say, brilliant, this sounds really interesting. Here's my email address. I'd love to keep discussing this over email. And that gives you got a bit more control over the discussion. And like we said, you've got a trail. You can see what's been discussed beforehand, and you've got evidence of anything. If anyone approaches you by the phone, and I know this is sort of less frequent nowadays for a client to discuss things with you over the phone, but if they're talking to you again, which is fine to have a chat on the phone about a job, they can tell you about it. You can say, that sounds really interesting. They might offer a fee. They might ask you what you would charge. And it's completely fine to say, thanks, I can't give you a quote right now, but I will think about it and I will send you an email this afternoon. So again, just give yourself time to discuss what you need to, and think about, you know, how you're going to work out your quote. A good tip is to always write everything down. So if someone does talk to you on the phone, for example, as soon as you finish the phone call, write down what they said they wanted it for, any questions that you need to ask, anything you need to go back to with email. It's quite easy to just get quite excited about something and rush off, but having things in writing, really important. So that's just a few practical points. Next up, just want to touch on what we call fee erosion tactics. And these don't happen necessarily very often, but, you know, we are living in a commercial world. Our clients, you know, some of them will happily pay absolutely appropriate fees. Other clients are thinking, you know, we've got this amount of money, but we'd like to only spend this amount of money. Can we do something with this illustrator that maybe makes them think about a bit too quickly about their quote coming back to us, maybe trying to speed things along. Really, these tactics are, you know, we're not saying these are evil people or anything, but it's, you know, like I said, it's commercial world. They're trying to reduce the fee, the quote that you might come back with. So they might say, for example, got this great job. We're probably using it for advertising in Europe, maybe some other stuff. Can you kind of give me a ballpark figure? And when people are saying a ballpark figure, what they mean is, can you give us a figure that would cover kind of quite a lot of uses? Excuse me. But we're not going to tell you exactly what those uses are. It's quite easy at that point to think, well, I'll give them a quote for the advertising uses they asked me for. But we have, from our experience, sometimes we find that illustrators might give a ballpark figure, but then the client gets the artwork, uses it for the advertising job they're asking about, but then also it starts appearing in other things. And the illustrator might see that, come back to the client, go, well, I can see you've used it on products. You've made some products with my illustration. Well, yeah, you gave us a ballpark figure, so we thought we could use it on what we wanted. And that's the danger of giving a ballpark figure. If someone asks you that, just go back and say, excuse me, I can't really give you a ballpark figure. I need to know how you'd use things so I can give you an accurate quote that works for both of us. So kind of turn it back on them, saying, I want this to work for you as well as for me. And that's a good way of trying to make sure you get all the details out of them. Other clients might say, I've got this job, I'm doing a brochure, which I'm handing out as a flyer for a nightclub. I'm a huge London nightclub and I'm going to distribute this all over the city. Just a picture that's going on the front. What's your day rate for this? What's your hourly rate? As I mentioned before, illustration isn't priced on hourly rates or day rates. And in that situation, again, always fine to go back and say, well, actually, illustration, it doesn't work that way. If you tell me, you know, what the exact usage is, how long you want to use it for, and where you want to use it, I can come back to you with an accurate quote. It's absolutely fine to go back with people if they don't quite understand. And then you can always send them that how to license document if need be. Another thing people sometimes say is, we love your work. We'd really like you to do this, you know, this app illustrations for us. We're talking to 3 other illustrators, but, you know, if you can give us a quote, that'd be great. This is quite an obvious tactic on the whole, that they're making you feel, oh, well, I mustn't quote too much because I'm quoting against three other illustrators. And it's a cheeky way of doing something. They may be talking to 3 other illustrators, but on the whole, they will have someone that they know they probably want to work with, which, let's say it's you. And they're kind of using that as a way of hopefully thinking, well, you know, they'll undercut their normal fee because they're concerned about, you know, competition with other illustrators. But you never know what's really happening behind the scenes here. So we always recommend, do not cut your costs. Don't reduce your quote because they are saying that there's other people quoting too. You've absolutely no idea what they might be coming in with. They might be all be coming in much higher than you. You might be offering them the lowest quote, who knows? Or they might be offering a terribly low quote, which you wouldn't do the job for. So just bear that in mind. Don't feel intimidated by somebody saying they're talking to other people. I wanted to put in front of you what we call the web technique, which is a kind of a useful technique that helps you build parameters, kind of limits within your quote that help you stick to a certain amount. So the web technique stands for the W, which is this is what you want to get. So this is what you might offer to your clients. This is the fee that you think the job is worth, and it's what you want. The E is what you expect to get. So that's what you think the client may come back with when they say, oh, well, in our budget, we can offer you this. It's probably going to be lower than what you want to get, but hopefully it's still reasonable. Then the B is what you better get. This is the absolute minimum that you would accept for the job. And it's quite healthy to have a minimum. If you know you've got a figure that you're not really going to go below, that can be really useful for you. It gives you a bit more power or a bit more understanding of where you're going to be in your discussions. And as I mentioned before, there's going to be to and fro. There's going to be talk, and this is a bit lower, a bit higher, and you want to know that you're not going to go below a certain figure, and you're going to come in at a certain figure and maybe expect to get something, who knows, in the middle or higher middle. So thinking about the web technique can be useful in terms of doing that. And when you're sending your quote off with people, we all know that you're sending a quote out to this client, and especially if they're a new client you've never worked with before. Oh, that's my plant getting exciting here. It can be, you think, oh, I hope I'm going to hear from them. And there are some terrible clients who don't respond when they've asked for quotes, and that just means they're very unprofessional, and it doesn't reflect on you at all. But if someone says we've got 3 other illustrators working, you can say, let me know how my quote sits with the others, if you feel you do need to acknowledge that. You're coming in at a decent level, but you want maybe to indicate that you are happy to negotiate with your clients. So you can say, here is my initial quote. Please let me know what you think. I'm happy to come to an arrangement that works for everyone. So this isn't saying I'm going to really drop my fee, but it is indicating that you are prepared to discuss this with them. You can also ask about when decisions on fees will be made to encourage them to kind of come back to you. And again, just saying, please come back to me either way. I'll put these notes into chat as well, just so you've got those to bear in mind. So as we talked about, it's kind of, it's being nice to people, being pleasant and things. And that's all. Oh, I've lost my chat bar. Where's my chat bar? Disappearing. I'll put that in as soon as I find it. I don't know where it's gone. But yeah, so those quotes can be useful things that you can put going forward. So there are points like at the beginning, you don't have to accept every single job. If someone won't take your quote, which is a really reasonable fee, it is absolutely fine to possibly walk away. But before you do that, it's worth trying to negotiate with your client. Are there things that could be changed within this commission that would make it more appropriate for you? So you've had a discussion. They won't have a budget. They haven't got a budget that fits your quote. But could you negotiate the license terms? So maybe they wanted your artwork to be used for 2 years, but you think what they're offering back to you is worth 1 year. Maybe that would work. Could you negotiate fewer deliverables? So they wanted 4 artworks. You feel what they've offered you could be for 2. Maybe that would work for them as well. But always valuing your time. So remembering, you're offering this really good service. You have a really great skill. You're a brilliant artist. So don't go below your B, your bottom line that we talked about with the web presence. So having understanding that you can move around from your quote, you can go up and down. Well, you can't go up from a quote, sadly, but you can go down. And that's another reason to come in at a good height, because you can't go up on a quote. You will find clients, and probably some of you have already experienced this. Someone goes, we love your artwork. You're so talented. We've got this mural we're doing, and there's no budget. But it'd be great exposure for you. Do not be tempted by exposure. There's the cliche that you can't eat exposure, you can't pay your rent on exposure. And, there's absolutely no guarantee that someone who's willing to pay lots of money for their commissions will walk past your mural and think, oh, I want to commission that artist. So do be conscious that people will try and get you to do work for nothing, but we recommend that isn't done. You could better spend your time creating projects that are going to draw people in to give you well paid for jobs. But at the same time, like we talked about, just being pleasant and nice to work with. If someone can't afford, or can't afford your quote, and are offering something quite low and terrible back, you can still be pleasant about it. Just say, oh, I'm sorry, this isn't quite working out for me, but do get in touch in the future if your budgets increase. Because you never know, that person you're talking to might be someone who moves on to an agency with big budgets or decent budgets, and then you've got something that is worth kind of discussing with them. So just to end up with, I just wanted to touch on contracts. Contracts are, can be a very big topic, a big subject, but they're really important things. And basically, a contract is paperwork, digital paperwork, that lays out all the aspects of the commission. And why is that good? Well, it helps you to understand what's going on. It helps your client to both understand what's going on. So you both have clarity about the project and certainty in that you know exactly how the artwork's going to be used, for how long, and where it's going to be used, for example. If you're offering your client a contract, this is showing that you're a professional. It's demonstrating that you're a professional. And if the client is giving you a contract, you reading that, understanding it, asking questions if you don't understand it, also shows that you're professional. You should never just get a contract with a client and go, yeah, great, that's fine, sign it, because actually, there are sometimes things hidden in a contract. And as Paolo talked about, worst case scenario, sometimes someone might hide in the contract that actually it's a copyright assignment, for example, when they had discussed something quite different. So always reading things are really important. And even things don't go wrong that often. Something down in writing is really good evidence for you to be able to go back to your client and say, well, I see you've been using my image on a duvet cover, but we only licensed it to be used on napkins or flannels or something like that. And so paperwork, really important. Some practical aspects about contracts is that they should always, always, always be in writing. It's really important that you can read it, come back to it, your client can read it and come back to it. And for every single job that you do, even if you're doing a job for your mum or your best friend or your cousin, no matter how close you are to them, no matter how much you trust them, something in paperwork is always much more important than just an idea of trust, because it's incredible how differently people can understand an agreement if it isn't actually down in writing. Also really important is getting a contract and everything sorted out before you start your artwork. Once you've started drawing and someone comes back saying, oh, we want to change what we want to use it for, etc., but we're not giving you any more money, it's harder to argue your case because you've now got a vested interest in keeping going because you've started. Whereas if you haven't started your artwork, you've got you're able to walk away or feel stronger negotiating changes than before. Like I mentioned, it's a commercial world. Clients' contracts are always going to be totally in their favor, and they will expect you to negotiate. So it's fine to go back and say, well, for a start, I don't understand clause 9, I don't understand clause 12, please explain this to me, or I don't agree with clause 8, can we change it to this? It's a bit like negotiating your fees. It's kind of going back to someone asking for changes, and at the same way that a fee may not get exactly where you want it to, negotiating a contract might not always get it exactly in your favor, but any improvements that you can get happening are going to be really beneficial to you. So it's always important to negotiate. And just before we finish, just the basics of a contract. As I mentioned, it's the license details you've agreed with the client. So those 3 basics I mentioned earlier, how it can be used, the usage, the territory of usage, and the time period of the license. What you'll be paid, very important, obviously, to know what you're going to be paid, and that's got to be in the contract to make sure you are paid. Deadlines and deliveries will be in there, and you've got to stick to your deadlines, because if it's in a contract, it's a legal agreement. You have agreed to deliver your work by the 1st of December. You have to do that or discuss it with them if there's problems. Many contracts include what's called a warranty, and basically a warranty is a promise to your client that your artwork is original, that it doesn't infringe anybody else's rights, and that you have the right to be able to license this work to them. And that's perfectly reasonable on the whole, because they are commissioning you to produce some brand new, exciting artwork. And Nurgül talked about cancellation fees. These are really important, especially in big projects that last a long time. If something's happening, if it's an editorial contract, then the agreement might happen very quickly because that's quite a fast-moving thing. But if you're doing, say, a picture book or maybe a long-term advertising session, they might cancel it halfway through. The publisher might be sold, your book doesn't go ahead, a new editor comes in. Cancellation fee is basically if it's the client's, not fault, but if the client's decision to stop the project. It's not something you've done, it's because they've changed their minds about something. So it's very important you get paid for half your fee if you've done half the work. Oh. So my last bit here is, again, just thinking about negotiating with the client in terms of your contract. Again, it's just pleasantly saying, being assertive. So, you know, maybe there is a payment clause missing. Maybe the license terms aren't super clear. Maybe there is not a cancellation clause in there. And you just want to go back to them saying, I'd like to discuss these points. I'd like us to have include a payment clause. We need to be more clear about the license terms, and I would like for us to put in a cancellation clause. They might come back saying we can do one of those. They might come back saying, yes, we'll do all of those. And again, it's a discussion. It's a toing and froing. Obviously, Paolo's talked about these issues in terms of people wanting more rights in their work. Within a contract, you want to make sure you watch out for the words copyright assignment, or what the American term, which is work for hire. Work for hire in the UK is not a legal definition, but in America, it basically means that it's a copyright assignment, that you are giving all the rights in the work over to your client. And as Paolo discussed, that is incredibly valuable if they can use it then on absolutely anything and sell it on to other people. So as we talked about before, if you see in a copyright assignment in agreement, go back to the client saying, I can see you've asked for a copyright assignment. That wasn't what we discussed when we were talking about the job at the beginning. And can we move this back to a more typical license? So just for specific usage, certain time period and certain territory. And again, you'll get into discussion and negotiation. And what we're hoping for, of course, is that you'll get things improved on what you were thinking about before. So quite a lot of things to think about there, but hopefully that's given you some good sense of how you can negotiate with your clients over your fees and your quotes, and also that important paperwork for your every project. Every single project must have that paperwork attached to it. So as I mentioned, I hope you've got a shot of those links, but there's a link here for the European Illustrators Forum website. If you go there, click on campaigning, and I'll put some links in as well for this. I think we've got them in chat already, but click on the campaigning section and that'll take you to our Price It Right resources, and then you'll get through to resources from lots of different countries. Some are open to anybody, some are open to the members of the organizations. And as Nurgül said, we absolutely encourage you to join your local organization if you haven't got one, because we are here to help you. And it's incredible what you can get from your local organization in terms of help and support in a way that you'll no doubt consider very valuable and completely worth the membership fee. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll pass you back to Rachel.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Derek. That was some really good, substantial content in there, really useful stuff. I'd just like to remind people that we're going to aim to have a short Q&A at the end. So if questions have been popping into your mind throughout the talk, please feel free to write those in the chat in advance. And lastly, I would like to introduce Clara Cerviño, illustrator and secretary of FIDIP in Spain, who will be delivering a 25-minute talk on the Ninja Guide and the training and skills needed to be a professional freelance illustrator. So over to you, Clara.
Hi, thank you. Sorry that I am with a big allergy attack, maybe to negotiation pricing projects, but sorry if I don't know, during the talk. Thank you so much for having me here. I will share my presentation. Let's like this. Can you see it right?
Yes, that looks great,
okay.
Clara.
Thank you. So let's go. As Rachel mentioned, I will talk about the Ninja Guide. And first of all, I would like to introduce myself. Now you will see why. I'm Clara Cerviño, biologist and illustrator. The thing is that I studied biology, and then I studied scientific illustration more accurately, but I never had this training in how to be a freelance illustrator in either of both careers. So for me, it was always very, very difficult to price my work. Actually, it was difficult anything of any of the skills and stuff I needed to become a professional illustrator. So at the beginning, well, I wish I could have heard this webinar before, because now you will see my methods for pricing. I was talking with the clients and was like, how much you will charge for this illustration? I was like, I don't know, maybe 50 euros. Sometimes I was even asking to the client, it's okay for you, 50 euros, it's too much. Should I lower my fees? I was really, really terrible. So please, this is a horror. Don't do this. Although I think it's a little inevitable at the beginning when we don't have the confidence in our work and we have tons of insecurities, but we must work on that to act more professional. And also here in Spain, we have this handicap that there are not a public listing. I think in other countries you have, where we can check how much other colleagues charge for same things. It could be helpful, but here we can have it. So luckily, we have the Ninja Guide and came to rescue me just when we need it. So for me, it was a before and an after in the way I made budgets and in general in the way I focus my professional life as an illustrator. You have it, well, I think Derek will put the link. I will put later the one in Spanish and in Galician. The Ninja Guide project is a project from the Association of Illustrators in Galicia. It came for the first time in 2016. And here you have also the one that you can find translated in English. There are also for this year, well, last year, the second edition that you can find it in Spanish with little actualizations, but mainly you can find what we are going to discuss today. But what exactly is the Ninja Guide? It is a guide for freelance illustrators that consider most of the problems we face in the profession every day and how to solve them or how to deal with them. Above all, the Ninja Guide is for those people who are starting out in the profession or who have desire to start. And as I said before, very useful. And you can see here, there are the topics that cover in the guide. And for starters, I will go a little bit over each of them, but well, they have talked much from many of the different points. Like Paolo with this one about the rights, so here I'm going to talk like very quick about it. And I don't know if the same things happens to you, but when I started, I thought that when I saw an illustration, it was not longer mine, and that no longer belonged to me, which now we know that is really, really bad. And it's very important to know that the rights are always our property. And as you can see here, if you don't recognize your rights, at the end, we leave our ideas unprotected. There are two main types of rights we must know, which are the moral rights and the economic rights. The moral ones are those that belong to us as authors from the mere act of creating the work, and they cannot be transferred. And the economic ones are those that we sell for money, which can be in form of exploitation, communication, transformation, reproduction, etc. Don't forget that the money that we gain must be proportional to the exploitation. As Paolo said, I think we have this big example of all the things that they can do with our work. So keep that in mind. Another topic that is discussed in the guide is in fact, and was in fact one of the reasons why this guide came out, is this speculative works or spec works. The name is used for those works in which the artist or creator has not guaranteed payment, which unfortunately happens more often than it could. There is also another term known as crowdsourcing, in which several people apply for the same project, but only one of them will get paid at the end. This is very common, at least here in Spain, in context, for example, to select a poster from popular parties or carnival. What happened is that in that open call for art is that they launch an open call for artists. So many illustrators professional and non-professional, present a final work made exclusively for that context, with the consequent investment of time and effort, but only one of them will be selected and get paid for the work. So you can imagine the bad thing of this spec work. To avoid those spec work, it's interesting, for example, before entering a contest, to check the conditions and requirements and be sure that they are as ethical as possible. For example, it would be better those contests based on presenting a portfolio or several images already made instead the ones that ask for specific brand new illustrations. Another classic when we start working as illustrators is working for free. Something that we haven't, well, it's better that we don't do, of course. I think it doesn't sound as strange as it sounds, but imagine if you go to a restaurant, no, and you ask for free food, probably nobody would do it. But instead, when we are talking about illustration, it's like a common thing to do, no? To say, you just this little thing that is very easy for you to do, and you can make it for free. In some cases, of course, we will do work for free for our own projects or family projects and friends, or for some work that we feel like doing for free in special occasions, but not because other people don't want to pay what they should. Don't worry, you can easily recognize them as soon as they will offer you useless things in return, as visibility, promotion, and future works. Nowadays, with Instagram, LinkedIn, and all social media, it is very easy to have this promotion, and we don't need somebody to promote our work. Also, when it's very difficult to measure. And also, one thing we have to keep in mind is that doing work for free not only harms other professionals and the profession in general, but above all, it harms ourselves. At first, it seems like we will be happy to do it, but in the end, you will find yourself making a big effort and spending valuable time that you could invest in yourself, such as working on new pieces for your portfolio or sending emails to get a real and well-paid commissions. And so, not happy with fighting with ourselves and our insecurities, we also have to deal with clients. As was Derek mentioned, like with really good advice, sometimes we have clients who already know the Illustrator profession and recognize the value of our work, which are great and easy and the best clients, but unfortunately, many other times they don't. Not because they are bad people or anything like that. Well, maybe sometimes they could be also, but very often out of ignorance, and we must learn how to deal with them. So to avoid problems, it's highly recommended to establish terms and conditions, better in paper, also as Derek mentioned, like many times, and it's really, really important, better in paper, even with your mom or dad or friends or family. And to avoid future misunderstandings, and also keep in mind that good practice benefits both parties. Have everything crystal clear from the start is a win-win scenario for everybody. Many times, especially when they don't know how the illustrator job is, they entail or they ask what we say in Spain, the 3 Bs, which is bueno, bonito, y barato. I don't know if maybe this can sound to you, which means to have everything as soon as possible, as cheap as possible, and with the high quality. As you know, and you can imagine after the whole presentation, it's a utopia because it is impossible to do a job that brings together all the 3 conditions. If something is good and fast, it cannot be cheap, as you can see here in the illustration. And if it's cheap and fast, cannot be good. Then also, now this the circle from the right, if it's for free, yeah, we don't even think about it. No, it can be a scam or the perfect moment to say, okay, you do it, bye-bye, I don't want this work. Well, this is a good one. You can imagine it's the most difficult point ever. I guess we'll agree on that because every project is different project for a different audience, with different client, with different scope. For me, after 12 years in the profession, every time a project comes into my hands is a pain to put a price on it. I mean, it's like, okay, I'm very happy to have this possibility, but I don't want to think about how to price it. My advice is that you must cool your mind. Don't let emotions cloud your judgment. This emotion of I want to do it, whatever it costs. Go through all the different steps, write down times, expenses, etc. Ask everything you need to know, such as deadlines, duration of the assignment, scope of the campaign, everything you need to be more precise. And after all this analysis and deliberation, send your budget to the client, but not before. And this one, if like me, you normally tend to set lower prices, usually due to lack of self-confidence, I encourage you, even if not very professional, to add 200 euros at the end of the project. Maybe, as I said, it's not the right thing to think about it, but I have to confess that since I have put into practice, I have never regretted. It's this kind of, okay, let's put 200 more and let's see. So for me, it's working just to think about it. As you can see in the first point, knowing how to apply the scales on which the work is based is important because, for example, to know for what type of client, the complexity of the project, how long we assign the rights, etc. All this info will give us clues about what price will be fairest for that job. I wrote down this quote from the Ninja Guide because I think it is important to keep in mind that when our prices are too low, we can give the impression that the work is not good. I think we also think about this when we buy something, no? If it's very, very cheap, the most of the time we think maybe it's not that good, no? Because we have this mindset. If we ourselves don't think it's worth it, who is going to believe in us, right? So I think that sometimes we can fall into the temptation of setting low prices as a favor to the client, when in reality, what we are doing is taking away value from our own work and harming ourselves. We are constantly trying to create calculating formulas. In fact, as also like I mentioned before, you have the pricing calculator on the web in which you can price some projects. This type of tool can give you an idea of the cost and help you, especially at the beginning, I guess. Like you can see here on the right, is more or less the same idea. There are some factors to take into account, and the most of the time is the more of everything the people want, the more expensive the work will be. Okay, about negotiation, I guess that Derek explained it much better than I would do, but just for you to know that we need to negotiate. Many times, at least for me, when I read a contract, it's like written in another language and it's very difficult to understand, but we have to make the effort to understand every word before we sign anything. I think it's important to have at least a minimum notion of terminology in legislation and copyright. At the end, we don't have what we deserve, we get what we negotiate, as the Ninja Guide said. And also keep in your mind that the clients are not really doing us a favor, they are interested in our work because they will benefit from it. So I think we must have this always in our mind. I remember the first time I signed a contract with a publisher. First, I didn't understand anything. And I thought that this contract was like, okay, that's it, you take it or leave it. But then talking with other colleagues and investigating, asking, I discovered that at the beginning, they give you a model contract, at least here in Spain, which is the same for many different projects and different authors. So it's very normal, or it's the common way to do it, to review it and discuss and negotiate the new conditions. Some things might change and another not. But what I want to say is that don't be afraid to propose changes. In the end, the most that can happen is that they say no, and it's now when you decide to take it or leave it, but not before. At this point, we should be like super proud. We have already negotiated, we have put the right price, we have the contract, everything is okay. We do the work, we work like hell to do great illustrations, send them to the client. For sure, the client will be very happy, and now is the time to get paid. So we are like, yoo-hoo, now we are going to get paid. But unfortunately, sometimes I'm sorry to tell you that this doesn't happen like this, and we have to fight also with the client to get paid. It's not, at least for me, the most of the cases, but sometimes it happens, so we have to be ready like a good ninja. So in these cases, I think the best is to first try to go through emails and calls, try to put some pressure on the client and get them to pay. Ultimately, if there is no way, we must go to a professional. Here you have some of the kinds of no-paying clients, and do it through a lawyer for the legal way. So here you have some ideas of what you can do with the different defaulters. Another beautiful thing that can happen to us is that someone may steal our work or misuse the illustration intentionally or due to lack of knowledge. That also may happen. Anyway, the result is the same. They are using our work for something for which they don't have permission. So there are some steps you could follow. First, by experience, make sure that it's really plagiarism, because sometimes there are things that are really similar, so we have to make sure that it is what it is. Then see if there is any type of benefit in the use that it is given, because perhaps it's not, or we can talk to colleagues, or we have to do a little bit of investigation. And when the situation is clear, to act in consequence. Also, one solution could be register our work. The registration is not irrefutable, but it does prevail in case of discrepancy. Also, keep in mind that when we do an illustration, we have all the sketches, all the steps, and in the end, it is easier to prove that those are ours, those are ours and not someone else. Almost to finish, we have a hard nut to crack, which are the Illustrator paperwork. After all, we are self-employee, freelance, and we also have to have documents up to date, pay the fees, and do all this, which is quite thankless and unpleasing above all. For me, even worse than reading contracts. Everything is also written in a quite incomprehensible language, and we have to have in mind that for every country, it might be different. The laws or the papers we have to take and to sign, and the register, also the taxes. Also, don't forget that expenses we have related to work, they are deductible. So it's important to keep all the receipts. And if, like to me, it seems crazy to you and you find it difficult or you need help, there are always professionals who can help us. And if you can afford it, for sure, is the money very well spent, although it's always that we have a minimum knowledge about it. Finally, as also they were saying, let me tell you that keeping ourselves informed and being part of an association or a larger group is always better and always make us stronger. So let's stop being the lonely wolves and be part of a group that can support us when time comes. Being a member of an association helps us to deal with things that as a unique individual person, it would be very difficult to achieve. And when we are part of an association, a community, we have resources to help us improve in many of the different aspects of the profession, both administrative and legislative, also if you have a problem with a client. So I encourage you to look for an association in your country, a local association, and become part of it. Just to finish, just remember that it's very important to understand our rights, to learn how to write contracts, to pay our fees, taking note of the time we spend doing everything, also sending emails to the client. This is also time that we spend in our work. And don't be afraid to communicate with your clients to negotiate better conditions. be part of a collective to be stronger, and of all, value ourselves and our work a lot. And from now on, just be ninjas, my friends. And thank you very much. You have the link so you can download the guide and read it at home and have it like always there close by. Thank you very much.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Clara. So much great content. Really recommend everybody downloads the Ninja Guide, and lovely illustrations throughout as well. So now we will move on to the Q&A portion of the event. I've seen a couple of questions pop up, but if you have any more questions, please write them in the chat and I'll aim to read as many as possible to our speakers today. Please also let me know in the chat if you would like me to direct any questions towards a specific speaker. And I'll just have a look now to see what questions we've already received. So I have a question from Catherine, who says, how should one price and license work for concept purposes only, so no usage? It's a request we often receive from ad agencies. I'm going to throw this out to the general speakers. Is there anybody who feels like they can answer that question for Catherine? Go for it, Derek.
I think Nurgül's always put some responses in, but we would suggest that anything that hasn't got an actual usage yet attached to it, it's the licenses for presentation use only. So there's no license for actual usage, but they're allowed to show it to people, for example, if that's what it's made for. And again, price-wise, if it isn't actually usage attached to it yet, you can work out a quote for a fee based on the effort and time it's taken to put it together, but not including a license to use it. So if they do then use it in the future, they have to come back to you to get a fee for the actual license.
Absolutely. Paolo?
If I may add something, the fact is that an idea can have a potential to be exploited beyond the original, the original purpose. So that's why the point is to fix exactly what you are assigning the license to use your idea for. So as Derek said, just for representation, but that's it. And whatever happens next, if they assign the work to another illustrator to use your idea to create something, they have to pay a fee for you, to you.
Great, thank you both. Next, we have a question from RP, who says, what if they say it's the same work for you, whether it's for an airship or for advertising, for licensing and other negotiation points? What would be our argument when a client says, well, it's just the same work, no matter where I put it? How would you guys respond to that?
Well, this kind of comes back to what we talked about in terms of usage, territory, and time period. That actually illustration quoting is based on those elements of how it's going to be used, and it can't work in terms of how one image that could be used anywhere, because that's the same argument saying, well, one illustrator might do a picture literally in 1 hour, the other person might do the same thing, might take them 2 weeks because they work differently. So you can't base how illustration is created on the time it takes to do it. So using our how to license illustration would be quite a useful thing if a client does say, but it's the same, it's one image, you can use it on anything at all, it doesn't make a difference. Again, like we talked about, it's the number of, if it's, in a commercial world, the number of people that see something, that use something, that have the advertising put in front of them, that is what the value is for something. So, or if it's selling a book cover, or if it's selling a magazine cover, it's there to attract people in and draw them in. So the bigger something is, the more value it has. So the airship would be a lot more than if it's just for a local newspaper advert.
That's really well explained. Yeah, so the purpose of the illustration is actually what you're pricing, not just the drawing itself.
Yeah.
Thank you, Derek. I'm going to move us down to a question from Liz, who says, if you discover a client has used your illustration for another product a couple of years after the initial commission, what should you do? Can I send that one to you, Clara?
Yeah, sure. That actually happened last year to me, because a project, and I think it was out of lack of knowledge, because they had this illustration, it was for a scientific project, and then use it for a poster after. And I didn't know, but somebody took a picture and sent it to me because my name wasn't in the illustration. So then I figured that they used this illustration for a second time. So I just sent an email, like kindly and nice, as Derek said before, like I have saw this, and they were super nice. They didn't know, so I told them that it's for every time and everyone. Every time that they have an illustration, they must know that it's for one use for a determined right. So I think I will do that. Just write and ask, and also if I consider ask more money for this, depending of the use that they are giving now. And I guess that they will be nice. They should.
You should hope. Is there anything you wanted to add on that one as well, Nurgül?
Actually, Clara pretty much covered it. I shared my opinion. A lot of times clients really don't know much about what is the licensing and what kind of usage rights out there. I mean, be surprised a lot. There are big clients, they do work a lot with creative works, and still they don't know in detail, just very basics they know. So we highly recommend when you meet up with your client right at the beginning, create the chat and conversation and check them out, how much they know about licensing world, the usage rights and everything. And if you realize they don't really know, maybe open up a conversation at the beginning. And if you notice something happened, a few years later, as I said on my chat, what I would do and what we do recommend to our members, which happened a few times, we first off write, just a notice saying, you don't have right to use this work of mine in this media. So please, let's talk about it. And depending on the reaction of the client, they may do it purposely, just being a smart, or they may not know the situation that they don't have the right. Depending on what is the situation, we need to get the position. We may need to get a lawyer if this is done purposely. And especially there's a income earnings out of this action. Definitely Illustrator has right to take act on legally actually against them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nurgül.
Yeah.
Next I have a question from Mathilde, who says, with faithful clients who come back over and over again, I sometimes like to offer a discount, but sometimes it does not feel like it gets noticed. So I'm not sure whether it's worth doing. I also don't like to mention it too much, but I do mention it in the invoice. What do you guys think about offering discounts to repeat clients? Paolo?
Well, it's always fair. If you work well with a client, with another director, it's okay to do that, but you should let them know. And if they don't ask, don't do it. Possibly they are ready to pay you even more. If they like you and they find you reliable and there is a nice working relationship, there is no point to make a discount. You give it. We must understand that our work has a value, and a discount devalues it. So if there is no reason to do that, maybe they ask, okay, can you do this extra thing this time? I don't really have the budget, but can you do a little more than the other time? You must be ready to do that. But on the other hand, don't give discounts if they don't ask for it, and if they don't give you a reason for that.
Nurgül?
I like to add, I totally agree with Paolo. And on the other hand, I think it's a good gesture to think about giving a discount. But on the other hand, if I was a client, that would make me think that then the illustrator I'm working with has a fat profit margin. So there I am, why? Because I have sustainable relationship in terms of business. The illustrator is making discounts without even asking for it. That would give a question mark and make me think there is a fat profit margin that Illustrator is actually calculating in his or her budget. So I agree with Paolo. Without mentioning any discount rate, I would not automatically give it to them. I would show my gesture in different ways. Actually, the price is always very tricky part. Gaining in the negotiation should never depend on a price. Gaining on a negotiation should depend on a good quality of a work, professional service delivery, and trustworthy relationship between client and, you know, licensor and the illustrator. So what I mean is, a lot of times what I see the complaints on the client side, they want to have a professional relationship. When they ask something, you know, receiving the files, delivering the layouts, or sharing the source files, everything should be, you know, nice, properly, systematically archived. And whenever client wants to reach you out, you know, you should get back to getting back to them. The term should be not more than 1 or 2 days or whatever, you know, with the services you're providing to the client. That would show your appreciation of your sustainable relationship with them. So that would also value your work and the perception of Illustrator in their mind.
Thanks, Nurgül.
If I can add just one little thing, we must be careful to identify the client with the art director. We love the art director loves us, but the money they're going to pay is not the art director's money. So when we give a discount, we don't give the discount to the art director, to the company. Yes. So we must be careful. If the client is a person you know directly, and you can deal directly with a client who's a situation you understand better, you can possibly do that. But if it's a company, don't do that, because the money you save the company, you don't save it to the art director or the person you relate to directly, but to a larger institution, a larger company. So somebody else is going to profit from your discount, not your friend.
Yeah, very good point.
Derek, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, just to briefly add on to that, because, well, Rachel, you know this, at the AOI, we've been thinking quite a lot over the last couple of years about how illustrators should actually put their prices up all the time. Because, you know, if you're in a job, if you're an employee, you're on the whole, you're getting an increase maybe every year, hopefully every year. And we think that often freelancers aren't really thinking about that actually you're offering this great service. And if you are getting regular clients, you know, from 10 years ago, and you're still charging the same amount of money for them, that really ought to change. We've made a resource about this for members, but really it's a case of explaining to people, well, you know, all my costs have gone up, everything, etc. You know, so my fee has to reflect what's happening in the world today, which is everything's more expensive. So yeah, bearing in mind, putting the fees up actually, maybe rather than thinking about a discount.
Brilliant, thank you, Derek.
I just like to add one detailed information. As I mentioned in my presentation, I mean, I just went through highlights very fast. There's so much deeper, detailed information in every title I shared. But I want to mention, which is Derek just pointed out, countries like us, you know, Turkey, we are in a high inflation environment. So we cannot predict anything. Not even for next 2 months. So illustrators who lives or works environments with high inflation, I highly recommend in their proposal, they should definitely put item as a principle saying this budget quotation, my code, is only valid within 15 days. And after 15 days, and if you're still not saying yes or no, or at the negotiation point, you know, extends more than 2 months or whatever, I'm not promising to keep this, you know, proposal I shared with you. This is very, very critical, because while we are thinking we are earning a good money with coming up this project, we may actually end up losing a lot of money.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Nurgül. So I'm looking at the time and it's absolutely flown by. We've reached the end of our session today. I wanted to say a huge thank you to our speakers today, Clara, Paolo, Nurgül, and Derek, for volunteering your time and your expertise. It was a really interesting and useful session. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to all of our attendees who came along today and spent their time with us and asked us some excellent questions in the chat as well. I can see lots of lovely thank yous coming in. As discussed, the EIF as an organisation really wants to support illustrators in making educational information about illustration pricing, licensing, negotiation accessible to all. So if you would like to find out more about our Price It Right campaign, please do check out the EIF website. We've got links dotted throughout the chat. You can go there for more information and to find further free resources about illustration pricing and licensing. And in a couple of days, you will also be able to find a recording of this session as well if you wanted to come back and recap on it. So finally, thank you to everybody, and we hope to see you again soon.